All right, it appears that we have a full house here today. I am Mark O'Connell, your Executive Director of the Association. Welcome to the annual Legislative Exchange. If I could ask everyone to very quickly just silence your phones or put them on vibrate so we don't have interruptions during the event. As most of you know, the restrooms are out the hallway and out these doors and down the hallway. If you do need to have conversations, I would ask that you take them out into the hallway so as not to interrupt any other part of the program. And that's the sound of a phone being de-escalated right there. We're going to get going right away. We're going to move the agenda around a little bit because the governor is here. So if you could please join me in rising for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. I know, don't put your chairs too close to the table because we're getting up again shortly. Governor Evers has been in office less than 1 month, and he has been very clear about this point. Local government, county government, is essential to the future success of this state. And as evidence of that, twice in less than 1 month into office, Governor Evers is coming to visit with county government. I would ask you all to please rise and give an incredibly warm Wisconsin Counties Association welcome to the governor of the great state of Wisconsin, Governor Tony Evers.
Thank you, everybody. Good morning. Good morning. Thank you. Now that you know where the bathrooms are and you can't talk while I'm talking, I'll be glad to start. So anyway, I want to thank everybody for inviting me. I'm glad to be back at WCEA after speaking to you just a few months ago before the election and talk about the important issues that are facing the state of Wisconsin and the counties in particular. Now, I know during the State of the State address a few weeks ago, and as you all likely already know this, we have significant issues facing our state. Certainly there's lots of good things going on, but we have issues that need solving, and the counties are a huge part of solving those problems. These challenges require us to set politics aside, and I know that's difficult, and work together to put the people of Wisconsin first. So today I'm excited to be back at WCA to talk about our plans moving forward and how we can work together to do the best we can for the people of Wisconsin. And for the counties and the state, obviously one of the top issues is transportation. And we have to work together in order to solve those problems. Many of you know our Secretary of Transportation designee, Craig Thompson, and I'm really excited about what the Secretary designee has already done to bring people together and work on this issue. Just last week, we announced members of the Transportation Stakeholder Task Force that consists of key players from all across the state, all sectors of the economy, and all users of different modes of transportation. And I believe some of those task members are here today after a meeting in La Crosse yesterday, so if they could stand up, I'd like to give them personally a round of applause. Members of the task force, Transportation Task Force, I know there's more than Mark here. Thank you. The task force has already met twice and is getting to work to finding a long-term, bipartisan solution to the transportation funding system in Wisconsin. I know I don't have to tell you that local governments and counties in particular have been squeezed by this issue, to wit, the issues of wheel taxes being passed in over 20 municipalities in the state of Wisconsin in order to make that happen. So you know, and I know that the present way that we do this is not sustainable. That's why the task force work is on this critical mission to provide input to fixing transportation in Wisconsin and have the insight to look at, and we're taking that insight from all sorts of different perspectives so that this transportation plan will work for every citizen in Wisconsin. And it's going to take everybody compromising and working together to get this done, and that's why I'm going to need your help after this Transportation Committee has made their final report to help us with the budget to make sure that we get this good proposals passed. But our budget is not just about transportation. My budget is also going to make good on the promise I made to you last December to close the dark store loophole in the state of Wisconsin. And I know this has been an important issue to many of you, your local communities, businesses, and homeowners who are paying the price, and I believe we can make this change going forward. In addition to the dark stores loophole, we have to make sure that, I am announcing today, that our budget is also committed to increasing funding for children and family aids. So we're going to make sure that the state is working together with the counties to serve our kids and families all across the state. But we're also going to need your help doing this going forward, and I'll need your support to get it done in this next budget. And finally, as I told you in September, I believe that we can do more together and that there is more that unites us than divides us. And I believe that starts with collaborating and partnering more and making sure that we're meeting the needs of the people of the state. Our partners at the local and county levels are equipped to respond to the needs of the communities, and the state has to trust you to do so. I also believe that government should be setting the floor and not the ceiling for our local and county governments. So whether it's fixing transportation, closing the dark store loophole, accessing and expanding access to broadband, improving child welfare programming, or reforming our criminal justice system, I've said all along that I will be a partner and not an obstacle for counties and local governments across the state. Now that's my commitment to you. I know we have a lot of work to solve these problems, whether it's transportation, whether it's corrections, whether it's making sure that your citizens and your taxpayers have access to broadband. All those issues are important, but I am absolutely confident that we can find the solutions that we need, putting people first and getting to work to move this state forward. We all need the counties to continue to play their role. We have to make sure that they have the resources to do that. So thanks so much for your time today. I appreciate all your good work. Many of the secretaries, the new secretaries, designees from a lot of departments will be meeting with you over the next couple of days. I know you will be as impressed as I am with their not only their willingness to work with counties, but their knowledge in the areas that of the departments are heading. There's a new day as it relates to government in Wisconsin, and we feel confident that moving forward with the counties, we can make a hell of a difference in the state of Wisconsin. So thanks so much for letting me speak to you quickly this morning, and have a good conference.
Thank you, Mark.
All right, the only folks leaving the room it's the press. They're following the governor to get a good story. It's not our people. At this time, it gives me great pleasure to introduce to you the chairman of the board of the Wisconsin Counties Association. Would you please join me in giving a very warm welcome to our chairman of the board, Mr. Lance Plimmel.
Thank you, everybody. I see a lot of faces out there that I recognize, and I want to tell you, just heard a very good message, a very conciliatory message from our governor. However, right this moment, this is probably one of the most dangerous times facing county government, and that's when the staff looks and realizes I tore up the speech they gave me, going completely off script, and I get 10 minutes to talk if I want. So I really appreciate your being here today, because this is where it starts. Typically, I start a speech and then I digress, but I'm thinking if I start digressed, then I'm probably not digressing. So we're gonna start there today, and I think sometimes maybe if you link a story to what you're trying to tell somebody, they tend to remember it a little better than if you just provide some facts and figures. And I think that's what has resonated with me over the years. So I guess I'd probably start this way. When I get up in the morning, at least over the last 10 or 20 years, my kids would ask me every day, "What are you going to go do today, Dad?" And I know it would just really tick them off, but I say, "Just going out to make the world a better place." And then I'd get that eye roll, and "Yeah, sure you are, Dad, that's wonderful." Well, this past, about a week ago, I had a younger cousin die. I come from a very small family. I had a 50-year-old cousin die after a very short bout with cancer. And at his visitation at the wake, he was a school educator. He was a dean of students at a high school in Chicago and kind of a legendary soccer coach down there. But what absolutely impressed me was the entire wall of a large funeral home, and this place was big, I mean probably this room and a half again, was covered with tributes from former students. And every one of them said something like, "You made me the man or the woman I am today. You are the person who brought me to where I am from a career perspective." But the one that really caught my attention was one that said, "Coach, I can't believe what you did for me. When I was a young person on one of your teams, my family couldn't afford," he was a soccer coach, "goalie gloves or any of the equipment that went with that." He said, "My cousin went over to the car, opened up the trunk and said, 'Let me give you these old gloves.' And he said he actually gave me a brand new pair of gloves, found out what size shoes I wore and bought them the next day. And the kid went on to be one of the first Americans to play professional soccer in Europe." What was amazing was he said, he called him coach, but he said, "You never coached me." He goes, "You were a life coach. You were somebody who provided the guidance and the ability to get to where I am today." And so I think sometimes, occasionally I tend to borrow or loosely quote somebody, and I think it was a Shakespearean quote, but it says, "My time upon the stage of action is but brief, yet in the drama each must play a part." And I think that everybody in this room today is here because they're extremely involved in government. You don't get thanked almost ever when you're out on the street. There's the occasional person that might say thank you for what you do, but generally speaking, what you do is in a thankless environment. Yet you go out there every single day and you do things that will make your community a better place at the end of the day. And for that, you should all be thanked time and time again. So now I'll go from the digression to what they actually sent me up here to do. And that's to talk just a little bit about the WCA. I'm extremely proud to represent you, the members, the elected officials in those counties, to represent our board of directors, to be able to get in front of you and tell us that this organization, our primary function is to lobby. And they do an incredible job, whether it's Kyle Christensen and his group, whether it's the staff, the people who put together these conferences, every one of them does a tremendous job. And the WCA has formed a vast array of partnerships, which have been largely responsible for those successes. We work long and hard to foster relationships with both sides of the aisle, with trade groups, with various levels of government, with everybody that we can to bring the best result to you in your counties. Sometimes I think that, the federal government kind of says to us, we're going to decide if there's extraterrestrial life somewhere. And the state government says, yeah, why don't you guys go to Mars and figure that out? And by the way, you're going to probably need to build a rocket ship and put a program together, and there's not any money to do that, and good luck. But you get it done. This is kind of where the rubber meets the road. You are the people that deliver those programs. We are an administrative arm of state government, and we are the ones that actually run those programs. You do that in your counties, and you do a remarkable job. So just by being here today, you've shown more interest than many of the people who are elected, who work in government, or you just had the opportunity to get here and you braved the roads, which have been miserable the last couple days. But I can't thank you enough for being here, for showing the willingness to meet with the people, to get out there, to forge those relationships. And all I ask is that you relish the process and you enjoy the day. Thank you very much.
A credit to county government in Wisconsin is this, manifested itself today with our next speaker. When the President Trump administration heard that we were gathering together, leadership in county government here in Madison on this day, to talk about issues important to the citizens of our state and to county government, Mr. Doug O'Brien called and said, could we appear before the body? Regional Director for the Department of Health and Human Services. Naturally, when anyone from the federal government or even state government asks to have some time with leadership in county government, we say yes. And that is why Doug O'Brien is here today. Please join me in welcoming to the stage the Regional Director for the Department of Health and Human Services, Mr. Doug O'Brien.
Good morning. Oh, that's great. Okay, we have some awake county officials today. Again, my name is Doug O'Brien, and I'm the Regional Director of the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services here in Region 5, headquartered in Chicago. Region 5 includes 6 states. I call it the Great Lakes region. It stretches from Ohio, Indiana, Michigan, Illinois, Minnesota, and of course, Wisconsin. And it is a great honor to be able to work with the people throughout the place where I call home and my family calls home. And it's also wonderful to be here with county officials because I sincerely mean this. I think you already heard from the governor. You know, a lot of people are going to come before you the next couple of days and just talk about how swell county government is. But in terms of the issue I want to talk about today, county government is vital. And it's interesting, there's an interesting nexus between, for me, between county government and the opioid crisis we face nationally. I've spent a lot of the last year and a half traveling around the Midwest talking to county governments because counties are uniquely where the rubber meets the road when it comes to battling the scourge of opioid addiction in the U.S. It impacts states differently. It impacts different counties differently. For some of you, it's one of your top issues. For others, it's lower on your priority list. But it truly is something that has a national scope and demands national attention. But it is also an issue that is only going to be solved at the local level. The opioid crisis in this country is going to be defeated in thousands of church basements, emergency rooms, community health centers, living rooms, and police departments all across the country. And as Lance mentioned earlier, he mentioned about federal government. We're off there planning on how to go to Mars, and it does feel like that pretty frequently, that we are on a wild ride sometimes given the scope of what we deal with. But on this issue, we are acutely focused on a vertical integration with our partners, and that really means state, local government, and providers. And nowhere is that more important than with counties, because when you think about the structure of counties in our country, and particularly here in the Midwest, counties are the front line. From your sheriffs, your correctional departments, your coroner's offices, your public health departments, your courts. That's the critical interface, and that is really where the opioid crisis meets government most acutely. So I want to talk real quick about the 5-point strategy that we have developed at the national level. I'm going to stick around as long as the weather allows today because I want to be available for those of you who may want to chat, and we're always available at the regional office to provide assistance to our governmental partners, whether that's technical assistance in terms of grants and other programmatic issues, or we're just talking about ways that other counties that we've seen have dealt with this issue throughout the Midwest. As far as the national, the HHS strategy, which really was driven very much out of the White House, Secretary Alex Azar has established the opioid crisis as one of the four primary focuses of HHS's work. But a lot of that has been directed straight from the White House. The president has said very clearly he wants this attacked, and he wants it attacked aggressively. The Trump family has seen addiction, as have so many of our families. The president, as a lot of you probably know, lost a brother to addiction. And he makes no bones about how important this is to him personally. In my family, we dealt with 20 years of the revolving door of addiction, relapse, recovery with my sister. But I'm proud that we're winning in our family, and my sister's now an alcohol and drug abuse counselor, helping people win the battle every day. And interestingly enough, last year when I was starting to travel around to counties all throughout the Midwest to talk about this issue, I was calling a lot of friends, fortunately made a lot of friends in local government over the years, and calling and saying, hey, can I come and talk to your county commissioners? Can I come and meet with your sheriff? I want to come and talk about some of the federal resources and partnerships that are available. And there was one county that was headed by a really good friend of mine who is the chairman of the board. And I kept getting the brush off from him. I'd known this guy interned for me many years ago, rising star in politics. And I kept calling and calling and calling, couldn't get a call back. He knew what I was calling about. Big issue, important issue. And I couldn't figure it out. Why am I not hearing back from this guy? Runs a county of about 1 million people in Illinois. Then I got a call one morning. He had entered into rehab because he'd been struggling with his own addiction, and he told me later he didn't have the guts to face me and talk about this issue. Fortunately, I saw him about a month ago for dinner, and he's doing great. And a lot of his friends are helping him fight this battle every day. So at the federal level, our 5-point strategy focuses on a number of things that are uniquely federal in nature, things that only the federal government really has the scope and resources to do. Those are, briefly, better data, which obviously is the collection of information from all around the country, because the more we know about the crisis, the better able we all are to battle it. That includes very unique things. And if you think about it, a lot of you have seen this in your own counties. Capturing data on just how many people are dying from opioid-related issues is hard to capture, because we don't typically test for all of the new drugs that are out there. We also don't typically record a death that may have resulted from an accident or from some other cause directly that was significantly contributed to by addiction. So even though we're seeing over 70,000 people die every year, just in terms of the statistics that we know from drug addiction, there are many more that aren't being captured. So even the severity of the problem is somewhat understated. But collecting better data about what's happening, what drugs are being used, where they're coming in, how they're being used, what are the physical impacts, is critical to being able to direct resources and work with our partners at state and local governments on making sure that they have the tools that they need to fight this epidemic. Another area is pain management. Counties, state governments don't have the wherewithal to study the very fundamentals of how we manage pain in our healthcare system. But better understanding new medications and how physicians and nurses and practitioners can better address pain management is going to be critical to moving to that next generation, that post-opioid generation of pain management. And the CDC and the NIH and our academic partners around the country are key to this. Research into addiction itself is critical. Not just understanding the fundamentals of addiction, but also understanding how we can use science and technology to better attack the disease from a clinical perspective. And that's why HHS and the federal government have made a major commitment to promoting the use of medication-assisted treatment at the local level. And in fact, that is a key to the funding stream from the federal government, is ensuring that medication-assisted treatment is widely available around the country. Also, one of the federal initiatives that also has a tremendous local impact, and I know a lot of you know all too much about this, and that is promoting the availability and use of overdose-reversing drugs, primarily naloxone. And the federal government has made a commitment to work with state and local governments to ensure the availability and training for first responders of naloxone. We continue with that commitment and have consistently increased funding. And we will continue to work with you, and I encourage anybody from any county who wants to up their game if they're already engaged in a program or is interested in finding out what those resources are to please contact our office. But most importantly of the 5-point strategy, enhancing the availability and effectiveness of addiction treatment. And that is why the federal government has made a funding commitment in providing technical assistance across the board to make sure that treatment is available to the people who need it. And this goes, there are myriad different elements to this, and I could go on for hours about it because, as we all know, healthcare is a pretty complicated issue. But primarily, we're increasing access under the Medicare and Medicaid programs. We're also taking steps to broaden the capacity to treat addiction through various rulemaking. A lot of that is very complex. But most importantly to the people in this room today, we're committed to providing funding through states, through the state targeted response and state opioid response grants. Those are grants that go to the Department of Health Services primarily, and the state administers those with local public health partners and providers across the state. And to date, just in the last 2 years, we've provided over $40 million in direct cash grants to the state of Wisconsin to assist in opioid response. We're going to continue this commitment. Over the last 3 years, the federal funding, specifically for opioid response, has gone from about $1 billion to close to $10 billion. And for people who do budgets and appropriations every year, not a lot of things go up by a factor of 10 over the course of 2 budget years. And that's an example of the bipartisan commitment in Congress and the commitment of this administration. But make no mistake, when it comes to winning this battle, we know that the victory is going to be won at the local level and that counties are going to play a vital role in defeating opioid addiction and misuse in this country. We're just down the road. We're down in Flatland, and I know that sometimes there's a little hesitancy to invite folks from Illinois up here. I will tell you, though, that in addition to traveling around the Midwest in my capacity as regional director of HHS, I may see most of you more often in my second full-time job, which is as a hockey dad. And I'll actually be back here in Madison next weekend with my daughter as our U12 team from Chicago will come up here and slice like a warm knife through butter the Wisconsin competition. One thing we can't do, we went up 2 weeks ago to Duluth and beat all the Minnesota teams. So, at least we have a common purpose in that. But again, I wanted to end on a light note, but I also wanted to reiterate our commitment at HHS, at the national level and the regional level, to work with our county partners, also to continue our work with the Wisconsin Department of Health Services, a great partner for us, and it will continue to be so. We're there as a resource for you. Please utilize us, share your ideas, share your needs, share your knowledge, and we'll share our commitment. So thank you very much, and have a great conference.
As many of you know, Secretary Designee of the Department of Transportation is Craig Thompson, and years ago he had worked for the Counties Association, in fact for quite some time, starting in the early 90s to early 2000s. Craig and I got to be very, very good colleagues and then very good friends, and in fact we were best man at each other's wedding, his first and my most recent. And last. In any event, so we communicate often. When he attended his first cabinet meeting, after the meeting, we had chatted, and I said, "So, what do you think of the cabinet?" And he said, "Mark, I've been around a lot of really good people my entire life. Spent a lot of time with fantastic folks in county government. I've been in transportation for quite some time, really good people there. But this cabinet is a cabinet of incredibly talented people, professional, polite, capable, futuristic, visionary. They have all the skills in the world. And he said, I'm just honored to be part of that cabinet. Well, we are honored today to have members of that cabinet with us today. We've done this before where we had the cabinet secretaries give short sort of introductory interactions with all of us so you know who they are and maybe a little bit about them. Today we have 3 cabinet secretaries. Tomorrow we will have a few more. Today, and I'll announce all of them, but then please join me in welcoming all 3. We have with us Secretary Joel Brennan from the Department of Administration, Secretary Emily Amundsen from the Department of Children and Families, and Secretary Peter Barca from the Department of Revenue. Please join me in welcoming 3 of Governor Evers' secretaries.
All right, I'm going to take the podium. Already you can see how great we work as a team. My name is Joel Brennan. I am the designee at this point for the Secretary, to be the Secretary of the Department of Administration. And with Mark's introduction there, I think what the 3 of us want to do is go find Craig and see why he's saying all these great things about it and building us up to you. But I'm pleased. I know the governor had a chance to be here a little bit ago. And I think one of the things that we all share as new cabinet secretaries here is a sense of optimism, a sense of hope, a sense of the opportunities that are available to us as we kind of turn the page. And I think I'm proud to serve in the governor's cabinet. I think he's a governor who you can be certain is somebody who you're going to be able to be proud of, and who in his heart knows that what's best for the kids and families in our state is what's best for what we can do for everybody here in forging a stronger partnership. He's stressed several things to his cabinet members already, and we hope we can continue to reflect those things in our work with you. Some of those things are transparency, accountability, a spirit of hard work. It's the same things that you bring to work every day in the places where you work. Governor Evers, I think you'll find, is interested as much in the next generation or more in the next generation than in the next election. And he's had a spirit over the last several years of working in partnership with the counties through his work as the superintendent, working on issues like education, but he's interested in making sure that we expand those over time. And a little bit, I'll just tell you a little bit about myself. I live in Milwaukee County. In fact, I met my Milwaukee County supervisor right over here, Willie Johnson, as I walked in the door. So he's here not only representing me, but also making sure that he says whatever, or he can report on whatever I say back to the people in Milwaukee. My wife and our 2 middle school kids live in Milwaukee. They go to the Milwaukee Public Schools. And most recently, before I took this job, I was the CEO of a nonprofit science and technology center in Milwaukee. It's a private facility, but it also afforded me the opportunity to work with county-run facilities like the Milwaukee Public Museum, the Milwaukee Art Museum, the Milwaukee County Zoo. And I have worked at the federal level, I've worked at the municipal level in government, and so I understand and appreciate the spirit of partnership and understand that government works best when there is a partnership, a shared responsibility amongst all of those who are part of the government process. And I can say, I guess to you, I would say candidly, I think the state in some ways has failed to live up to its end of the bargain on some important ways in recent years. And I'm hopeful and confident you're going to find the Evers administration to be a strong partner which tries to find the ways to make the most of our collective efforts and our collective resources. Whether it's in things like aids to local government, children and family aids that Emily, I'm sure, is going to talk a little bit about, medical assistance, clean water in both the urban areas and rural areas, transportation, economic development, correction in the courts. I think those are the issues that this governor, this administration cares about. We think we can do better by you, do right by you in the coming weeks. And I think you're going to see this governor and his administration enhancing the commitment that the state has to be a better partner with you on these and other issues. You have great representation in Mark and his team. You can be confident that they've already come with a binder that's about this thick of your legislative priorities, and they have shared that around the cabinet. I think each one of us may have had individual meetings already. And you're well organized, you're powerful because you communicate together, and those are very important things in making sure that you get things done. You have an ambitious agenda. I can promise you, as we put together all the moving pieces, that there are going to be things that you really like and things that you will be able, I hope, to embrace in that budget. You did hand us a binder, Mark, that's about that thick, so I'm going to guarantee you that you probably aren't going to be happy with everything. You may not get everything on there. But I hope that that's a signal that we will be accessible to you, we will be responsive to you, and we are advocates for the same thing. We are advocates for making sure that we can get the most out of the people who we represent, most out of things like economic development in our parts, in whatever part of the state you come from, and make sure that the state can be as responsive as possible to you. Finally, I want to, on behalf of the administration, I want to just say thank you. And maybe this is what I should have started with, but I want to say thank you on behalf of the administration because you represent the same people we do. You employ thousands of people around the state, and part of what this governor has stood for from the start is making sure that we respect people who are in public service, that they understand that what they do is noble, what they do is important, and that they deserve our respect, from the governor on down to county supervisors, to county executives, to people who work at every level within government. The work that they do is highly important, it's highly valued, and so on behalf of our administration and as your partners, I want to just say thank you for the work that you do, because it's really important. And most of the big issues that happen around the state of Wisconsin, some of them will happen from the top down. More and more of them will bubble up from the surface. They'll bubble up from the places that you hail from, the people who you represent, and they will be represented in what gets communicated to us and in the actions that we take. And so again, on behalf of the administration, I want to say thank you. I want to welcome you to know that you have advocates in the administration, know that you have people who value and know what you do, and that we want to make sure that we are partners, not just partners in the first month of what we do, but in the next 4 years and in the time after that, because the work that we're doing right now, I started by saying, a few minutes ago, I said I have 2 kids, they're 11 and 13 years old. The work that we're doing together in partnership is going to make sure that the kind of state that they inherit, the kind of state that your kids, your grandkids inherit, is hopefully going to be a strong one for generations to come. So thanks for the work that you do. Thanks, Mark, for letting us have a chance to introduce ourselves today, and I look forward to working with you over time. Thanks a lot.
Good morning, everybody. All right. Okay. Well, boy, I've loved everything that I've heard so far today, and I wish I could just say ditto and then kind of get off the stage. But I want to say thank you to Mark and also to Lance and to the entire Wisconsin Counties Association for inviting me to join you here today. Most importantly, thanks to all of you guys for coming out, traveling to Madison, be part of this gathering. It's such an honor to be here with my brand new colleagues in the Evers administration, Secretary Barca, Secretary Brennan. I just feel like every time I'm in a room with you guys, it's warm feelings, lots of love. So here's the personal part. I love this idea of a personal story, Lance, because I think that that's true. It's something that we hang on to. So I'm Emily Amundsen, and I'm the Secretary Designee of the Department of Children and Families here in Wisconsin. And I was a kid who never wanted to do anything but teach. That's it. I taught my stuffed animals. I taught my younger brother. I tried to teach my parents. That was a little bit of a growth opportunity for me. So after college here in Madison, I moved to New York City with the intention of becoming an English teacher, and that's exactly what I did. Found myself in a school, though, and I quickly realized that I could have been the best, hardest working teacher in the country. I could have been an award-winning teacher, but there were still 6 other teachers that my students had in their day, and a whole wide world outside of the classroom. My kids needed so much more than I could give them in my classroom. The school needed to be better. The supports in the community needed to be better. The world around us needed to be better for my students, for my kids. I had the good fortune to find a few folks who were also imagining the kind of school that built wraparound supports for kids and families that I thought would help my students, my kids, to succeed. So out in New York City, we wrote a grant and we opened that school, the Urban Assembly School for Law and Justice in Brooklyn, New York, and succeed those students did. Our first graduating class just had their 10-year reunion, and I could not be prouder of the alumni from this school and the impact that they're having across the country in their careers. So after an experience like this as an early career teacher, you think, well, geez, if I can do this, what else can I do to fix systems that work for kids? So my passion for tinkering led me home to Wisconsin and led me to the Department of Public Instruction. And I felt like the luckiest kid in the world to get that job. During my tenure at that agency over the past decade, we immersed ourselves in issues like student and staff mental health, trauma-informed care, wraparound supports for kids, youth homelessness, youth justice, community schools, after-school programs, all of these tools that touch on the education sector for sure, but are also incumbent on partnerships, relationships, dot connecting with so many others. So now, as Secretary Designee at Children and Families, I am chomping at the bit to deepen and strengthen the connections with DPI, of course, but so many other agencies and entities across our great state. Governor Evers, my mentor, calls it dot connecting, so I guess that's what I better call it too. Throughout the transition, Governor Evers talked a lot about the importance of connecting dots between agencies and within our own departments, connecting dots to share ideas and vision for how we best serve the people of Wisconsin. That is what I believe to be the key role of Wisconsin Counties Association. You all connect the dots across the state. You elevate the shared challenges. You share the best practices to help Wisconsinites from Superior to Kenosha. For all of us at the Department of Children and Families, your role as dot connectors has been absolutely critical to drawing attention to the growing crisis in child welfare across our state. The opioid and meth epidemic has dramatically increased the amount of children who are in the care of your Health and Human Services departments and has extended the amount of time those kiddos are in care. The needs of our families are becoming increasingly complex as addiction brings multiple layers of trauma to children and parents alike. With dramatically increasing caseloads, lagging resources, we know we are not doing right by our kids, but we're also not providing the critical support to our staff who are on the front lines of this crisis every day. I'm here to say that I hear you. In fact, your Wisconsin Counties Association magazine profiling this issue was the very first assignment I gave to my leadership team. Read it, know it. We share vital priorities to increase funding for child welfare, to reform youth justice, and to expand access to high-quality, affordable child care. I'm also here to say, though, that I need your help. It's the stories from your staff on the ground that are going to make this budget request more than just numbers. These stories, the stories of our frontline staff who are moving mountains on behalf of kids, these are the individuals who are going to get this request done with the legislature. I know that we have a challenge ahead, and it's no small task. From child welfare to youth justice to child care, we have big problems to solve. But I also know there's no better vision than this shared vision that we are creating for kids and families across our state. I look forward to working with all of you to keep Governor Evers' vision moving forward, and that's what's best for kids is what's best for our state. So thanks so much for the invitation today.
Well, good morning. And great to be back with all of you. I feel like we've had a long, positive relationship, both as a legislative leader and as a representative from the Kenosha-Racine area, where we have a very active contingent of constitutional officials, county board chairs, county board members, and so I value that relationship enormously. I've known Mark about as long as my wife, so that's a good thing, I guess. And I am very honored and pleased to be part of the Evers administration. Although I got to tell you, my first day didn't go so well. Here it is on a Sunday, 5:30 in the morning. I'm coming up for my first cabinet meeting. I was pretty enthused. In fact, I had that transition document right beneath the fruit that I was cutting at 5:30 in the morning as we were getting ready to get in our Jeep with my wife to come up here because the inaugural was the next day. And all of a sudden, I'm ready to walk. She said, I'll back up the Jeep. I said, great, I'll be out in a minute. So I'm taking my fruit, ready to go outside. And my wife comes coming back right at me. I said, what's going on? She said, oh, I forgot my charging cord. She said, go look in the kitchen. I'll look in the bedroom. So I go in the kitchen. She goes in the bedroom. Not less than 60 seconds later, we walk out, and our Jeep is gone. All of our luggage, all of my briefcases, 2 full briefcases, laptop, everything you can imagine. So as you can guess, it was a little disconcerting on that first day. So we waited for the police to come, and I told Kathy, well, I'm going to take our other vehicle. Why don't you stay here? So I'm sure we're going to get it back in a few hours. Probably kids joyriding. I don't know how many people are out at 5:30 in the morning joyriding, but anyway, we figured for sure we'd get it back. I took our other vehicle with no clothes, not much anything. But I got to our first cabinet meeting. I said, well, Governor, I said, I had a pretty traumatic morning, but I do have my transition document. I got my celebratory cigar to smoke at the inaugural tomorrow night, so I'm ready to go. So it was a pretty traumatic start, but it's all been great since then. Let me tell you, we just had our third cabinet meeting this past week. I certainly concur with our Secretary of Administration's remarks. We've got a strong, cohesive group of people that all have a great background in the areas that they're responsible for. And, I think that this group is a natural alliance for our new administration because, and I'm going to start with this and I'm going to end with this, because as you know, our governor has talked endlessly, both in the campaign and since he's been elected, about looking for bipartisan solutions. And of course, he was a nonpartisan official as a superintendent of schools for so many terms, and he worked very successfully with school boards in a bipartisan type of basis. And that's where I think all of you can play a role in helping us to move that forward. So I'm going to come back to that, but I want to mention that, at the Department of Revenue, we have just very vital relationships with all of you. Our state and local finance division has always been a very strong one, worked very closely with all of you. In fact, we meet 3 times a year with the Register of Deeds. Next one's coming up on March 5th with the county treasurers, with real property listers. 3 times a year we have roundtables with state and local finance on issues of state and local finance with all of you across the state. And I assure you we'll continue to strengthen and improve and enhance that relationship because it is vital that we are joined at the hip and are working very closely together. At the Department of Revenue, we have a number of goals that I know the governor cares very deeply about. Trying to get a middle-class tax break for the citizens of this state. The middle class and those struggling to get there have been the most beleaguered. And as I've always said in every speech I've ever given, is that what made America and Wisconsin the economic envy of the world was having a strong, vibrant middle class. So the governor's working very hard on that. I know the Republicans have a proposal. I'm hoping we can come together on that proposal because the governor has a very vibrant idea of how we can make that work. I know he's mentioned the dark store issue, which I know is vitally important to all of you. We have to finally find a solution to the dark stores. Now, I don't think we have to look very far for a solution. I know there's a Ledge Council committee, but we had a bill that we had a majority of members of the House and members of the Senate that were sponsors of the bill. So hopefully that can be done sometime very soon. I've been working very closely with the legislators in western Wisconsin at the governor's request on trying to bring back Minnesota and Wisconsin tax reciprocity. I had a call with my counterpart in Minnesota just this past week, and we're hoping that we can bring that to a positive conclusion. But what I would say is when I met with the governor initially in regard to this position, you know, our values, of course, are aligned perfectly. You know, the idea of strong customer service. And DOR has done pretty well in that respect, and hopefully we can make it even stronger. But I know in regard to getting out tax refunds, we're able to do that 90% of the time in 6 days or less, especially for those that file electronic forms. Also, you know, answering phone calls on a timely basis. And, you know, my mantra in terms of being in leadership positions, whether it be in the private sector or the public sector, is what you measure is what you achieve. And, you know, I talked to my senior leadership staff about a book that I read back when I was president of a company about going from good to great. And I said, maybe we're already great, but we can be greater. And that's part of the goal that I've set up. And so we measure, one thing at DOR, we measure things very carefully. And I challenge all of you, let us know if there's some things we need to measure in terms of our relationship with counties and local governments. Let us know, and we'll adopt those metrics because we do value those relationships. Also, in the President Bill Clinton's administration, I headed the Regulatory Fairness Commissions. And I value the idea of trying to streamline regulations, trying to make things understandable. Sometimes we do a very complex tax code, but let's make it so that people can understand it, so that our mutual constituents, both local and state taxpayers, we make it as easy as possible and as less taxing as possible to have to pay taxes, or to meet any other compliance kinds of regulations that might be out there. And that's a goal that we have. You know, the governor talked, I know, about a lot of various issues, which my colleagues already addressed. And I think it's a vibrant agenda that just aligns perfectly with counties, you know, whether it be, as Emily just mentioned, children and family issues, opioid addictions, mental health, which I know the governor talked about, transportation issues. You know, all of those issues I think are so important. But I'm going to end on this point, and that's the issue of trying to find bipartisan compromise and solutions. You know, I'm very proud of the fact that I was a legislative leader. I worked closely with Speaker Voss. We came up with an MOU to try and make sure we could have smoother relations, have you know, at least better comedy within the legislature, have people work together more successfully. We passed a lot of bills together, which were very important. But we need to make sure that we do this across the state. I think what's going on in Washington, D.C. is absolutely disgraceful. We have a governor that certainly is trying to adopt a tremendous standard here in Wisconsin, but that's where you can play a role because you're all elected on a nonpartisan basis, just like the governor was. So please reach out to your legislators, let them know that our governor is going to extend a hand, and let's make sure that we return that, and let's make sure we look for those kinds of solutions, because at the end of the day, you know, we're all about trying to make sure that we deliver results for the citizens of this great state to make sure that Wisconsin's always moving forward. So great to be with you all. I look forward to continuing that close relationship, and thanks for all you do. Well, you know, it's funny you should say that because it's sitting at Pullman Motors. You'd be amazed how much damage you can cause with a hammer in a Jeep. So it's slowly being fixed. I don't know where our possessions are. I don't know if we'll ever see those again, though. But thanks for asking.
All right, ladies and gentlemen, we will take a 15-minute break. So let's resume at 10:05. 10:05. We'll get rolling again. All right, if we could take our seats. If we could take our seats, we'll get rolling. If I could ask my colleagues to assist in bringing people in the room. But well, it's cold. This is the part of the program where nobody listens. Can I get more volume, Steve? All right. I know it's the legislative exchange, and we seem to be pretty focused on exchanging right now. So, but we're gonna carry on with the program because there's something I'd like to chat with you about that is near and dear to all of us. What I want to talk to you about the arrow button. There we go. What you want me to use here? Yeah. Okay. What I'd like to talk with you about is predicting the future. Now, I know it may seem difficult, but in reality, it really isn't that hard. I mean, we have been predicting the future for about as long as man has existed. It has always fascinated us. What's going to happen tomorrow? How can we find out? How do we determine our fortune? And we've had so many methods over time to try to reveal or unveil or find the secret. I'm just going to ask you to hit the button because this is not working. We first started over 2,000 years ago when the Babylonians believed that you could discern the future by the position and motion of the planets. You discern what was going to happen based on where the 5 visible planets to the naked eye were located in the sky. The Babylonian culture got absorbed into Greek culture, and the Greeks took it one step further and came up with this idea, this concept, that not only could you do it with could you discern the future based on the position or motion of the planets, but further, that the exact position of the planets, the stars, the sun, and the moon at the time of your birth would determine your personality and your future. One of the leading, I guess you might call him at the time, scholars in the area was a guy by the name of Claudius Ptolemy. Ptolemy wrote a treatise on the issue. It's called Tetrabiblos. And even today, it's viewed by many as the Bible of what we know today as astrology. Let's go to the next slide. We've also used mystics or seers, wizards in ancient times to determine what the future would look like. In fact, our rulers, our kings, queens, noblemen would consult these wizards or seers to determine what a battle might look like, who was going to prevail, how a certain action would be received by the masses. And some of these wizards, seers, fortune tellers were sometimes right. And when they were, they took on positions of great authority and deference in their tribe or clan or kingdom. Let's go to the next slide. In medieval times, some people believed that you could discern the future based on the shape that certain that wax or lead splatterings would make. In the 17th century, when Dutch merchants opened up trade routes between China and Europe, and tea became widely consumed in Europe, this kind of transformed into tea leaf reading. You could discern the future based on the shape of tea leaves in a teacup. In the Mideast, Turkish coffee was used. A person would drink Turkish coffee, leave some grounds in the bottom of the cup, turn it over onto a plate, and look at the shapes that would be formed and determine what the future would be for the individual that was drinking. More commonly in Europe, it was tea that was used. You would drink a cup of tea, swish around the remaining tea leaves, and then read the leaves in the teacup top to bottom in a spiral manner and look at the shapes. The shapes near the top of the teacup were today's near future predictions. The shapes at the bottom of the teacup would be far off future. If the shape was something like a snake, an enemy was going to enter your life. If it was a house, then good fortune might come your way. If it was a spade, it might be you're going to have success in commerce. If it was a mountain, there's going to be challenges in your life. Tasseography. Go to the next. Quamalak. This was a practice of discerning the future practiced by shamans in Asia, Central Asia, where it started. The belief was that you could utilize a mechanism to connect with the spiritual world. How it would happen would be this. A cloth would be laid out on the ground, and 41 stones or beans or pieces of dried sheep dung would be placed on this cloth. And then one by one, the shaman would take each one of these stones or beans, hold it to the shaman's forehead in order to create or open up the third eye, which could see into the future and connect with the spiritual world. After all 41 had been touched to the forehead, a second eye was formed and you could see into the future. Incantations would be cited, and a spirit would jump from the spirit world to the earthly realm and reveal answers to questions you might have, and then also move the beans or stones around to reveal what a person's future would be. Palmistry, palm reading, been around for a long time. This, many believe that this form of future telling had its roots way back in Hindu roots, with Valmiki Maharisha, who wrote a very lengthy document, 567 stanzas of palmistry, palm reading knowledge. This document became sort of the go-to document for a long time. Again, much of this, it started in India, it moved to Europe, it moved to the Mideast. The Greeks embraced some of this palm reading. Aristotle actually found a document on a particular altar, revealed it to his ruler at the time, Alexander the Great, who then used this document on palm reading to evaluate the character of his inner circle and officers. The Catholic Church viewed palm reading as a pagan superstition, and it was actually classified as one of the 7 forbidden arts. Later, in the early 19th century and early 20th century and late 19th century, an individual became quite noted for his palm reading skills. A guy by the name of William John Warner, a very enterprising Irishman who said that he had gone to India to study under the experts of palmistry. Came back, and to add mystique, he may have been the first really great marketing person. He changed his name to Chero. And he billed himself as the expert in determining one's future based on reading your palms. And he developed quite a client list. It included the famous actress Sarah Bernhardt. It included Mata Hari, Oscar Wilde. Mark Twain was a client of his. Joseph Chamberlain, General Kitchener, Thomas Edison, and our very own American President Grover Cleveland were all clients of Chero. Is this working now? Okay. Tarot cards were used to predict the future. Now, we have this perception today that tarot cards have some sort of dark mystique to them. It wasn't until recently, really the 18th century, that tarot cards took on some dark meaning. Until then, they've been around for centuries. Tarot cards are really nothing more than a deck of cards. Ace through 10, 4 face cards, king, queen, knight, and then either it's called a knave. There was also a 5th suit. There were 4 suits. There was also a 5th suit, 21-card 5th suit, and then one additional card called the Fool. 4 suits, trump suit, and the Fool. In fact, a regular tarot deck of cards is still used today in many card games. But in the 18th century, it took on a more dark meaning, and the position of the cards when revealed by an individual who wished to have their future told could be discerned by someone who proclaimed that they were an expert in the order and understanding of what was played and when. We've also had historical figures that didn't use beans or cards or palms, but rather their imagination or fantasy to predict what the future might look like. In 1485, Leonardo da Vinci envisioned that someday humans would fly through the air, and even drew it up. Looks like sort of like a dragonfly almost, in what he called the ornithopter. Back in 1485. Perhaps the most famous prognosticator of all, or futurist or predictor, was a guy by the name of Jules Verne. Let's hit the... Who made his predictions through books. This book here, From the Earth to the Moon, 1865, Jules Verne predicted solar sails, lunar modules, and spaceship splashdowns. In 1865, he went on to write another book, 20,000 Leagues Under the Sea. Let's go to the next slide. In 1870, where he predicted electric submarines and what we know today as tasers. That's a long time ago. People could even dream this up. Well, I guess Jules Verne could, but no one else. Go to the next slide. In another work of his, the year 2889, Jules Verne predicted television, newscasts, and video conferencing. Back in 1889. Now we're about 950 years ahead of where Jules Verne thought we would be in 2889, but he predicted that. Let's go to the next slide. More recent times, John Elfreth Watkins Jr. predicted in the year 1900 that we would have television and mobile phones in a published article. People thought he was crazy at that time, but it came true. Next. Arthur C. Clarke, the famous futurist scientist, in 1968 predicted the iPad and online newspapers, way before Stephen Jobs could even take a spoonful of oatmeal. Arthur C. Clarke. Next. The now deceased Roger Ebert, famed movie critic, back in 1987 said, there's going to come a time when we don't go to the movies anymore, that we sit in our homes and movies come to us, and we'll watch them in the comfort of our home. Of course, today we know that as Netflix, but back in 1987, people thought Roger Ebert was off his rocker. The tools of the past to make predictions of the future, beans, cards, fantasy, palms, stones, planets, stars, those were the tools of the past. We have better tools today. We have better ability today. The tools of today are more like, next slide, knowledge, data, analytics, analysis, research, information. Those are the tools of today. Are they better? Yes. Are they more accurate? Absolutely. Is there less mystique? Yes. Are they make as good as stories? Not necessarily, but they're better. Let's go to the next slide. In 1973, the very first cell call was made. The Sears Tower was completed to become the tallest building in the world. Inflation was 6.1%. Terry Ann Mewson from De Pere, Wisconsin became Miss America. FedEx opened its doors to start business. The MRI, jet ski, and the barcode were invented. Monica Lewinsky was born. Our president told us that he was not a crook. Inflation was 6.1%. Oh, I guess I said that. Gasoline was 40 cents a gallon. Jimmy Carter, who would 3 years later become the President of the United States, indicated in 1973 that 4 years earlier he had witnessed and seen a UFO in Leary, Georgia, while standing outside a Lions Club. And in 1973, that was the last year we had as few births in the state of Wisconsin as we have today. We've been on a steady trajectory downward in the number of little people that we are creating in this state, which has huge implications for our schools, for our tax base, for our workforce, for our tax collections, for our wealth. We've had the fewest births since 1973. We are down 11% in a 10-year period, roughly 04 to 06 to like 14 to 60, down 11%. In 2007, we had 158 births for every 100 deaths. Today, we have 124 births for every 100 deaths. That is a dramatic drop. It's not just a little, it's a lot. And it has huge implications for our future. Let's go to the next slide. This is a map that describes this. If you're a county in blue, that means your births are up. Which counties have births that are up in this 10-year period? Brown, Chippewa, Eau Claire, Forest, Juneau, Lafayette, Marathon, Outagamie, Taylor, Trempealeau, Vernon, and Winnebago. If you're a dark red county, your births are down more than 20%. If you're any shade of red or pink, your births are down. 4 counties are down more than 20%. Calumet, Monroe, Sawyer, and Washburn. That has serious implications for the future. Let's take a minute to look at the other end of the spectrum, 65 plus. Today, we have 43 counties where the proportion of 65-year-old plus is under 20%. 43 counties have 1 in 5 individuals 65 or older or less. So not that many people of retirement age, 43 counties. But what the statistics and data tells us is this. In 10 years' time, that is going to change to 6 counties that have 20% or less of their population over age 65. Currently, 17% of our population is over age 65 today. By 2030, we're going to have only 6 counties with 20% or less under age 65. What does that mean? It means we're getting old really, really quick. And combined with the first statistic, we're not producing enough young people. So as our implications for K-12, tech college, two-year college, university, workforce, tax base. And if we assume for a moment that we are more of government consumers at very young and older and not much in the middle, what this tells us is that we've got some very serious challenges on the horizon. Let's go to the next slide. By 2030, 21 counties, 21 of us under current trends, will have a 65-plus population where it's 1 in 3 of us. 1/3 of your population in 21 counties will be 65 and older. Who are they? Let's take a look. Let's look at this map. If you're red, the darker the red, the more 65-year-old plus people you have. Of the 21 counties, they're going to have at least 1 in 3 people over age 65. Adams, Bayfield, Buffalo, Burnett, Crawford, Dorr, Florence, Green Lake, Iron, Langlade, Lincoln, Marinette, Marquette, Oneida, Pepin, Price, Rusk, Sawyer, Washburn, Wapaka, and Vilas. You see something about this map? Northern Wisconsin, we've got trouble. we've got a big, big challenge here. We're getting old as a state really quick, but in northern Wisconsin, we're getting there at lightning speed. And combined with the previous statistics, we're not producing enough young people. It's one of the reasons that in northern Wisconsin, you can't find any help in many of the tourist attractions. I mean, some restaurants are closing one day a week. Can't find anybody to work. It's not necessarily that the younger people don't want to work. There aren't any. Can't find them. Now, it might be that they don't want to work, but can't find them. Let's go to the next slide. My purpose here is not to frighten you, but rather to relay to you that today we have the ability to predict the future. With data, with analysis, with analytics, with analysis, with research, with information. We have that ability. And since we have that ability, we also have the ability to create the future we desire as opposed to reacting to the future that is presented to us at the time. We have that ability. We're not using stones or beads or cards or palms. This is real life data and analysis. Now, we've been at this at the association for a little while. We produced this document called the Green Book, a book of statistical analysis with maps and numbers and rankings on a whole host of subjects. And we're going to continue to produce that and add to it periodically. Because the belief is this: the more information you have about what you look like now and what you're going to look like, the better decisions you can make regarding the public policies that govern your borders and position your county and therefore our state for future success. But there's one weapon which is more powerful than all of it, than all the data, all the analysis, all the analytics, all the research. One weapon that's kind of a secret weapon. It's you. You know your county better than anyone. The more information we can give you about your county, and the more opportunity you have to manipulate and understand it, the better off you are. So here's what we've done. We've created this opportunity for you to get into the data, for you to manipulate, for you to move things around, for you to interact. And we've done this because we scooped up as an association perhaps the brightest research mind ever in the borders of the state of Wisconsin, in Dale Knapp. Used to work for the Taxpayers Alliance. Now he's part of the Wisconsin Counties team. And he has spent the past several months putting together this tool which will allow any one of you or anyone in your county to help discern what your future looks like. And when you can discern that, if you like it, do exactly what you're doing. But if you don't like it, you have an opportunity to change it. And in a couple of minutes, you're going to experience this tool. Dale's going to walk you through it. So let me conclude my portion with this. At the risk of being repetitive, and I've told you this before, I apologize, but I'm going to tell you again. At the association, we, as staff, are so incredibly proud to represent you. It is so heartening as we engage in the business of county government and representing you in the state capitol and in Washington, D.C. to try to accomplish that which you believe is appropriate and desirable as you govern your counties. We know that we maintain the fabric of society. We know that. We know that we don't have the big headline issues. We know that most of the citizenry really hopes they never have to consume any one of our services. We also know that the existence of county government and the services we provide are what makes our society work. It's what makes it desirable. It's what makes Wisconsin such a great place. We know that. And as was mentioned earlier today, you don't get any credit for that. You don't ask for it, but you don't get it. But that doesn't reduce how proud we are as staff to be your staff and to work for you and to advance the issues that are important to you. So with that, I will conclude. Thank you for your time. And please join me in welcoming Dale Knapp, who's going to walk us through his tool.
They gave me a different one. Thank you, Mark. Good morning. So, as Mark mentioned, my name is Dale Knapp, and I am not a mystic. I am not a wizard, despite what he might tell you sometimes. But I'm the new Director of Research and Analytics for the Wisconsin Counties Association. And I'm happy to be here today to introduce to you an exciting new venture for the Wisconsin Counties Association. Now, Mark spent a little bit of time talking about some bad news for the state. The number of births is at a low not seen since 1973. So before I introduce this new venture, I want to tell you that WCA is doing its part to solve the problem. As some of you know, Kyle Christensen and his lovely bride are expecting a new child anytime between, I think, now and the end of February. Andrea Treader and her husband are also expecting a child this spring. So we're doing our part. And Mark wanted to do his part as well. So in May of last year, he hired me to be the new Director of Research for WCA. And today, and Mark probably doesn't know this, exactly 9 months later, I'm here to introduce Mark's new baby, Forward Analytics. On a more serious note, Mark has wanted research capacity at WCA for a long time. And after 18 years with the Wisconsin Taxpayers Alliance and a number of conversations with Mark, I was up for the challenge to help create and build out a research arm for the Counties Association. While we still have a few things to work out, I'm happy to be here today to introduce this new arm. So what do we envision for Forward Analytics? First, it's going to be the go-to place for quality, nonpartisan research and data on a whole host of issues affecting the state. The fiscal health of state government, something that's often misunderstood. We're going to address it. Job creation, how much and where? Yes. Migration, we'll tackle that. What Mark just talked about, demographic changes. We're going to do some research on that. And these are just a few of the topics that we're going to tackle. Forward Analytics will be your go-to source for much of the data you want and need. Last year we provided you with a green book, as Mark mentioned, and I think there were some copies out there if you don't have yours. It's filled with information county workers, county officials need. But forward analytics is going to take that a step further, providing you with historical data on some of the measures in the Green Book and other data points of interest. And I have some exciting news, as Mark foreshadowed here, on that in a bit. In other words, forward analytics is here to help you. So let me briefly, before I get to sort of the big part of what I'm going to talk about, touch on a couple of research projects that are in the works. I'm purposely going to give you just snippets to pique your interest. We're going to tackle the issue of births in some detail. Regional patterns, age patterns. But I want to show you this slide, which I think says a whole lot. As Mark mentioned, births are down significantly. But one of the things you see when you start breaking things out, in the southern half of the state, they're down 8%. That's bad. But when you go to the northern part of the state, they're down 50% more. They're down 12%. So there's a regional component to this. When you take the southern part of the state, though, and you break it into urban and rural, you see that same pattern. The urban parts of the state are doing a little bit better than the rural parts. In our upcoming research, we're going to have all of this information broken down for you on a county basis, so you know where your county is, give you an idea of what you can expect in the future. Let's move ahead from birth. Millennials. Love them, hate them, whatever. At their peak, baby boomers were about 40% of Wisconsin's workforce. Within 10 years, the millennials are going to approach that 40%. That's the group that we need to attract and retain if we want to continue to grow the state's workforce. What's happening with millennials? How are we doing? We're going to have a piece on that, but let me give you a little snippet here. These are the oldest millennials. And what's happened with them? In 2000, they were in high school. They were 15 to 19 years old. 5 years later, a lot of them were going to college as they were 20 to 24. Wisconsin lost about 8,000 of those people. As they moved into their late 20s and early 30s, the population that we really need to attract, one, because that's the beginning of our real full-time workforce, and they're at the age where they're starting families, where you get the births again, we're losing more and more of them. So Wisconsin is not doing very well retaining that group of millennials. And as Mark talked about with births, when you look at this group over that time period, there's only 6 counties in the state. 6 counties: Dane, St. Croix, Milwaukee, Outagamie, Brown, and Sauk, that have actually increased that population. In every other county, we've lost millennials. And we're going to dig into that a little bit more. When I was at the Taxpayers Alliance, we did a fair amount of research on migration patterns. And the news was always mixed. Migration sort of went up and down, but generally we were losing 10 to 15,000 people per year, which actually for a northern state was not bad. Typically Minnesota, Iowa, Michigan were losing more. So and if we want to grow our economy, we need to attract people from other states. So how are we doing on that? Again, we're going to dig into it in great detail, but we have mixed news. The most recent information indicates that we've gone from losing 10,000 people per year to just about breaking even. So we're kind of moving in the right direction. But it also indicates that we're doing worse in the prime group that we need to attract, that we've attracted historically, the 25 to 45-year-olds. So again, we're going to dig into that. So where do you go to get all this information? We have a website. There we go. We have, well, stay there. All right. So we have a website, forwardanalytics.net. And I'm going to walk you through it a little bit first to give you a sense of what you're going to be able to find there. So on the front page, you're going to have the most recent research that's being put out. We're also going to link to research, to newspaper articles that that say important things about work that we're doing. So there have been some interesting pieces out on births. So if we think that it's important, we'll put that up there for you to go and look at. But we will have a research section. And there we go. So we will have a research section where you'll be able to download the research that we've been working on. I will have a blog. I'm not going to post every day. I may not post every week. But these will be short snippets on research, on events that are happening, in the state. If some new piece of information comes out on migration patterns and we haven't done anything on it yet, I'll write a little piece interpreting sort of what it means for us. So that'll be something that you'll want to keep in mind. We will have a data section. So this section is going to look a little bit different than this. There you will be able to go and download PDF form, Excel form, information on personal income, population change, population, the demographics, property taxes. There will be a whole host of data there. It'll be your go-to place in an easy format to download the data that you need. And I would encourage you, if there's data that you need, let me know, and if it's doable and if it's reasonable to do, we'll get it up there. I think the best thing at this point about the website, again, is the Green Book. We've had a lot of comments on the Green Book. What we've been able to do is create an interactive Green Book for you. So you'll be able to go online. You can download the Green Book in a PDF form. That's fine. But you can go to these various sections, and it's the same sections that we have in the Green Book. And you can click on one, and what you'll see is in the intro to the Green Book, we just have a little bit of a discussion of these measures. What you're going to be able to see is right away, how does your county look on all of the measures in that section? Okay. So you can pick your county, and I'm going to pick the county that I grew up in, Jefferson County. So you can pick your county. It'll update for you. This page will have all the most recent data. So what do I see? All right. So I see Jefferson County's population growth, less than the state. Its share of the population 25 to 54, that primary working age, very similar. Big difference in commuting. Okay, it is a net out commuting county. There's a significant portion of the county goes elsewhere to work. So now I want to dig into this. Okay, I look at this and I go, okay, population growth, we're significantly less than the state. let's take a look. So I can go up here, and I can go to population growth. And what you'll see is a map identical to what you see in the Green Book. Except now what you can do is you can pick your year. You don't have to look at the most current data. You can go back 10 years and look at how did I look 10 years ago. Okay? Let's go back to the current. Okay? So I'm Jefferson County. There we go. Okay, I hover over it, and right away it tells me where I'm at in terms of population growth. I can go over here, and I have a bar chart of where I sit and basically who I'm comparable to. This is the best part about it, though. This is a lot of information. I've got a big picture of what the state looks like in terms of population growth. As Mark said, that the north is doing a little bit worse than the southern part of the state. But it's a lot to take in. So what I can do is I can take my mouse, there's Jefferson County, and I can just click, hold it down, and draw a little box. I drew it a little bit bigger than I want. And now I've got my neighbors. How do I look versus my neighbors? Okay, and right away, I can see where Jefferson County is relative to its neighbors. And I can go back and just click, and it comes back. So I get population change. And so now I want to go and I want to look at commuting. That was the other one where we were very different from the state. And I look, and the one thing that stands out on the map, Jefferson County is a white county sort of amidst a bunch of blues. So what I'm seeing right away, I get a sense of, okay, we're basically one of the only big out-commuting counties in the region. And again, I can highlight that. And now I have work to do because the bar chart did not update. But we'll get that to work. So that would be able to show then what's going on, in terms of the region. So for most of these pieces, most of this data, you're going to have 10 years to be able to work with. And as we go forward, it'll be 11, 12, 13, 14, 15 years. I can go back then, and I can pick a different section. Okay. I'm interested in economy and development. And again, I pick Jefferson County. Or Jackson. And in terms of the economy, again, what I see is job growth down compared to up for the state. But unemployment is basically on par. And again, so this is where I can use all of this information. What this tells me is we're on par with the state with unemployment. So if the people in our county, we're not more unemployed, even though our job growth's down. What's happening? They're going to other counties to work. So the jobs aren't in the county, they're in other counties. Does that mean does that have implications for what we do as counties or what we do as municipalities? I think it does. So as we go, we're going to be adding to this. We're going to be adding new data points in here. The other nice thing about this is we will be updating this data as it sort of comes online. When you get the Green Book, you have data for a full year, even though there might be new data out there. Okay? You'll be able to come here and be able to look at the most recent information. So Mark spoke about predicting the future. Are we going to predict the future? Well, sometimes we will. Well, we will try, but with some caveats. But the thing is, I don't have it, Mark doesn't have it, you don't have all of the information as individuals to predict the future completely accurately. But what we can do is bring data to the big questions that we have, that you have, and get a much better idea of what the future holds. If when you look at this, your county looks like in 20 years is going to be 30% 65 or older. And if your birth rates right now are down 10%, 15%, and maybe your job growth is not what it wants, are there things you can do? Are there things you can encourage the state to help you with to change that future? Peter Drucker, I think, said it best. The best way to predict the future is to create the future. And having this data available and usable for you will help you do that. So thank you. I will be around for the next 2 days. If you want to talk more about what we should study or items for the Green Book, I'd be happy to listen. Thank you very much.
We've got some time, so before the next speaker, so we got maybe 10 minutes for questions, comments, thoughts. Yeah.
Yeah, real quickly, I think that's going to be very useful. I'm wondering, are you anticipating perhaps building in there for any of these topics an algorithm that will allow us to plug in, say, 5 years or 10 years and project forward based on that trend? I think that would be very useful for our budgeting, et cetera.
We will be able to do that. And again, so yes, we can do that, I guess is the answer. Again, we're gradually building this out. This is a little bit time consuming to do, but yes, we will be able to do that.
Yeah, so the assumption being, let's say we have this statistic on mentally ill in our jails, and there's some function related to unemployment, let's say, that we made some connection to either a multiple regression analysis or something like that. And then we said, okay, well, knowing that, what does it look like in the future if we had unemployment ticked up by 0.2% in the next 5 years? Okay, well, we'd be able to plug that in, and then you chart out what does it look like might happen if, in fact, our assumptions are correct. Will we be able to do that? Yes, we will. It's a little time consuming, but yes. And every one of us, we have some really smart people in our account. We can help you do that, or you're going to have people that are going to be able to get online and do this all on their own. So we can certainly. Other questions, thoughts, comments? Yeah, yes.
Yeah. Tie this into other data that the state has available, such as Department of Workforce Development, because when you're talking jobs, you would want to know, unemployment rates, wage rates, how many manufacturers you have in a county, what's there, what's not there, because, like you said, with Red County, the upper north, I would think they'd want that information, because you can't come up with policy unless you have other details.
Yeah, the question is, we're going to tie it into other state databases like workforce development, wage rates, unemployment rates.
The answer to that is we can do that. Where we're at now is when we put the Green Book together, we were a little bit limited in what we could do, obviously. We are now almost unlimited. So again, this is all work in progress, but yes, we will. This will become much more robust than it is now. Yes.
Raise your hand, we'll get a microphone over to you.
A big factor is the abortions. If you have a lot of abortions, that will lower the birth rate. That we can have more children.
Thank you. If a birth is delivered outside of your county, as most of them are in our county, Calumet, who gets credit for it? How is that recorded? It makes a big difference, folks.
It does make a big difference. If you go way back, it was based on where the child was born. Now it's based on the residence of the mother, and they go to painstaking efforts to make sure that they get that. So if the mother lives in your county, you get credit for the birth.
Yes. How do our demographics compare to the United States? I mean, if the whole United States is losing that population and that as well, how does that reflect what we can do to get people from other states? Because they're going to try to do the same thing to us, basically.
Yeah, that's a good question. I mean, the U.S. population is growing. And in Wisconsin, we are basically 2% of everything, except cheese and cranberries. Then we're a little more. But otherwise, 2% of everything. So, yeah, you could say this might be a futile exercise because we're really just doing a net zero as a nation. I don't know that I would really characterize it that way because it's not just about attracting people from somewhere else. It's about creating Wisconsin as an attractive place to be for the future wealth makers of society. And whether it's a grow your own or import or, in fact, not even likely, but certain, a combination of both, that's the case. I mean, as Dale alluded to, if you look at this and you see your county based on a whole host of factors being a color that you don't like and heading in a direction you don't care for, then you want to ask yourself, what is it, what actions might I take now to position me to be more attractive and change the color of my county on the charts in the future? Let's use a real life example. I don't have enough young people, I'm not growing them, and I'm not attracting them. So would the natural question be, well, what is it the young people want? Okay, well, one of the things I'll relate to you is going to be broadband everywhere you can breathe. So if I'm a county or a municipality, even a city, I'm going to want to be really interested in doing that. Because if I don't have it, I really have very little chance of attracting that young population. So that's a very narrow, thin example. There's a lot more to it than that simple little example, but that would be something along those lines. But in regards to the U.S. population is growing. I don't think it's a net zero situation. We want to look at this as how we position ourselves for future success.
Yes, considering the fact that we have probably the best technical educational system in the country, and the areas where we have people being educated as plumbers, welders, etc., and we have a large number of low growth and homegrown population, but as far as people coming in this country, both legally and illegally, and that wouldn't it be prudent to attract some of the legal people coming into this country into our tech school systems so we can keep them here as part of our manufacturing process?
Yeah, absolutely. Other questions, thoughts, comments, suggestions? Yeah.
Hi, is there going to be a link to this website on the WCA website? Because I and my colleague have tried right now and we can't find this website.
Yeah, the website is not live yet. We've got some bugs to work out yet. So, but yes, there will be a link on the WCA website, and again, we're hoping to get it live, within a week or so.
It'll be a live link to the WCA website. There'll also be a piece in the magazine talking about this. There'll also be a release in the electronic newsletter with a live link. So in the coming weeks, as everything is ironed out, you'll be able to get to it in a whole manner of different routes. Another question over here? Over here? Anyone else?
I want to thank you for being futuristic. I am so excited. It's the first time I've come to something I'm really excited about in the last 15 years.
No.
Jerry Iverson out of Gaming County. You had mentioned that there are 6 counties that are attracting millennials. Have you done research on why? What are the factors?
If look at the counties, Brown, Milwaukee, Dane. Well, just let's start there. Big urban counties. Outagamie's in that same thing. The outlier was Sauk. Sauk was a little bit of an outlier there, but they want to go to urban areas, generally urban areas, with lots of amenities, with lots of infrastructure. They want to live downtown. They don't necessarily want to live in the suburbs. So that's what's attracting them. Now, as they age, as they move into their 30s, that might change. They might want to move out to the suburbs, move to a little bit more rural areas. We don't know. They claim they're not going to, but again, that may change.
Okay, other questions? Was there another one in the back? Did I miss that? Okay, I'll make a couple of predictions about the future. I predict that tonight the potato bar will be a hit. I predict that. I predict we're going to have some really, really good food at the event tonight. I predict that there's going to be a lot of legislators at our event tonight, and I predict anyone who would like to have their book signed by Governor Tommy Thompson will have a chance to do so, because he is going to be at the event tonight and available for anyone who wishes to have their book signed to have it signed by him. And I would, yes, that does deserve applause. That's right. Congratulations, Tommy Thompson. So with that, please join me in thanking Dale Knapp for his great colleague, brilliant mind. At this point, we're going to talk about artificial intelligence. So we've done some work in this artificial intelligence area. It's an area where we need to get involved. There are better, more efficient ways, in many cases, to accomplish our goals and objectives or serve the public. In many cases in our state statutes, our laws are way behind society. But that does not mean that society is going to slow down. Society is moving at lightning speed. Technology is moving at lightning speed. We can either be part of that and try to shape it and steer it, or we will be told how others will shape and steer it. I'd rather be in the former. And here to help guide us through this area is our good friend, Oliver Buxa. Please join me in welcoming artificial intelligence expert, Oliver Buxa.
Good morning. I did not get the briefing that you have to start your speech by introducing new babies, or I would have tried harder. Tried harder to write an adequate introduction. But I want to start with what Dale ended with, this crystal ball, right? The best way to create the future, to predict the future, is to create one. And Mark said earlier that he's proud to serve as your staff. Well, you are very lucky that you have staff in Mark and his team who are, in fact, trying to create that future. So the effort I'm going to share with you, what we're doing here, is exactly that. It is not just sitting back and waiting what all is coming at us, but trying to understand what's coming at us and to figure out what we can do with it. I've presented a few times on the digital county, so I'm not going to tell the whole story about it. What I want to share with you today is a little bit of introduction for those of you who have not heard as much about it. What is the great transformation? That's the term that's being used now for this era of change that we're facing. What is the digital county? What work has been done already, but more importantly, where is that journey of the digital county going? Briefly about myself, I'm a strategist, have spent my entire career in strategy, founded my own business, my strategy source, but more importantly, in 2017, I founded a volunteer group, Advancing AI Wisconsin. We've rallied a lot of experts and people with a passion for this topic throughout Wisconsin, not just about artificial intelligence, but about how technology is changing our society and how it's changing government. So let's start with what is the great transformation. I used to refer to this as digital disruption. And then somebody approached me and said, you know, digital disruption, it's so depressing. Can't you just find a better term? So I saw in one of the slides somebody referred to it as the great transformation. And just as I embraced that new term, I thought back, the Great Depression, the Great Regression, the Great Transformation. Whenever we call something the great something, it's not really all that great. So what is that great transformation? There is a wave of new technologies that are coming our way. We're already used now to PC and mobile and social media. We've kind of learned what that is. But now there is artificial intelligence and the Internet of Things and blockchain. And every week, every month, there's a new topic. And where typically these waves of technologies, they would come around every 10 years. They give you a little time to learn what it is, to adapt, to see what's happening elsewhere in the country. These are coming just really in a rapid succession at us. Now, there is a benefit to these technologies. We just talked about the shortage of workers. I'm talking to a lot of companies and company leaders in the state, and almost everyone has that same problem. We don't have enough people to produce how much we could produce based on the demand that's out there. So we're holding back the growth, the economic growth in the state. And one of the premises of this great transformation, at least in the early stages, is that it has the potential to make our workforce a lot more productive. So if we're thinking about the million or so people who are in the workforce, if we could make them 10% more productive, that's the equivalent of 100,000 new workers, right? That is an opportunity to address that demographic change. And in fact, we may not have a choice but to address the demographic change. Oops, sorry, double-clicked. So there are many predictions about what's going to happen in this new world, in this era of change. And people call it the most disruptive era we've ever witnessed. And that has to do, number one, with the speed. It's coming at us very fast, but it's also impacting every industry. Typically in the past, there was one sector that was particularly impacted, oftentimes manufacturing. This time, because of the different range of technologies, it's impacting cognitive processes, where something that, like we just saw an example of research. Machines are increasingly capable of performing tasks that traditionally we would have assigned to humans, right? And so it's not just going to be manufacturing, it's going to impact banking, insurance, it's going to impact retail, it's going to impact sales, it's even going to impact fast food. So we've given presentations about that, and that would take an hour alone. Productivity gains are predicted to be as high as 25–30%. That is very significant. We could amplify our workforce by a quarter to a third by utilizing these technologies. Now imagine on the flip side, what if we do not use the technologies, but somebody else chooses to do so? Whether that's another state or another country. They're going to outperform us. Their products are going to be a lot cheaper, and that's going to cause a problem. And that is where the impetus started for me to create Advancing AI Wisconsin, because I spent a week in California in late 2016, and I learned how billions of dollars are being pumped into that, how new businesses are being started everywhere, how every young person is sort of trying to educate themselves in getting onto that wave. And I came back to Wisconsin, and there was none of that, or very little, and very few people had an understanding of what is happening. And as the younger people are learning about this, and I have firsthand experiences. They want to work for companies and for organizations that at least have an understanding and are addressing this future. And if they don't find that here in Wisconsin, they're going to go somewhere else. There's different predictions in terms of what's going to happen to the workforce. Most predictions until recently that I've read about were all predicting significant loss of jobs. That net, this would be an era of dramatic job losses. I just heard a presentation from a gentleman from an organization called Gartner, and he was the first one who predicted that more new jobs would be created than jobs would be eliminated. And he said, every new technology has created new opportunities and created jobs that just previously didn't even exist, right? And so he's predicting that there'll be a net positive, but there's a big caveat, because we don't know where these new jobs are going to be created. And if they're going to be created in California or in Massachusetts or in India or in Ukraine, then that's not going to be a net benefit to us. So we want to make sure that positive impact is occurring here in Wisconsin. So what is the role of government in all of that? There's multiple roles. For one, government sets the legislative and regulatory context. At this point in time, whether it's at the federal level or at the state level, there is not a significant dynamic yet where our governments have sort of embraced and understood that issue and are providing a legislative framework for that. There are some other countries that are a little bit further ahead, but nobody has really sorted this out because it is coming so fast, and oftentimes government is focused on the here and now, all the challenges that are in front of you, but there is going to be a huge role to be played. One example is around the ethics of artificial intelligence. Data is being collected on all of us. If you could see your Google profile or your Facebook profile and what all these guys know about you, you might get some second thoughts about that. The question is, where's the ethical boundary? If I know something about my customers, about my constituents, how can I use that? How should I use that? Microsoft, Apple, Google, they have self-imposed ethical guidelines, but even they said, we wish the government would tell us where the boundary is, because if we kind of come to that point of ethical versus profits, we don't always trust ourselves, right? And so there is going to be a big role to be played on the legislation. Utilizing technology to serve your constituents. I mean, you're doing that today. You have websites now. You have, remote services. You are using technology in providing the many things that counties do. And one of the starting points for the digital county effort was actually exactly that question. What if we could take some of the things you do today and we could reimagine them through the eyes of these new technologies? How could we find productivity gains? How could we create better service experiences? And then there's a last role of government, which is fostering successful adoption. You are not just serving your constituents, but you're also creating an environment, an atmosphere in your counties or in your regions that is either technology friendly or maybe not technology friendly. You can set an example for the adoption of these new technologies. So, yeah, I've covered let me fast forward through those. So what is the digital county? The starting point was that I had a conversation with Troy Streckenbach. Is Troy here today? I don't see a hand rising up. But Troy was, in the early stages of our efforts, we knocked on any door where somebody was willing to open it, and we tried to bring the message out about new technologies. And Troy not only opened his door to have the conversation, he asked one really important question in that conversation, which was, what can I do? And so we sat down and we brainstormed and we came up with this idea. And the original idea was, what if we could take Brown County and reimagine it into the future? What if we could apply artificial intelligence and blockchain and all these other technologies and create a new view of Brown County? And Troy, to his credit, said, I don't want to do that. I don't want to make this about Brown County. I want to bring other counties into the fold. So we extended the invitation, and ultimately 12 counties participated, more than 150 individuals. So now the question is, so counties do so many things. What are we going to focus on? So we identified 15 use cases. We had to drop one due to a resource issue, but 15 use cases, and I'll talk about those in a little bit more detail. And we created 3 events. We had one in Eau Claire, one in Green Bay, and one in Cedarburg to focus on different technology aspects. So on the participation, I think the power of these events was that we had county employees from the front lines. This wasn't some, experts from the state or just county leaders. We had sheriff's deputies. We had people from the highway department. We had health and human services workers. And they were sitting down with technology experts and described the reality of how they do their job. And then these technology experts brought in their knowledge of the technologies and said, here's an idea of how this could be applied. And we only had 3 hours at that event to do that conversation, but we came surprisingly far, and it really showed us that there's a significant potential. Mark, the WCA, stepped up in a big way as our lead sponsor. We could not have created this event without the WCA. And you can see Brown County, Eau Claire County, and several other counties also stepped up as sponsors. So we could bring in those experts. We could bring them together at these venues. So a special thank you to all of our sponsors. So the 14 use cases, we looked at road maintenance. Every county has to maintain roads. How do you collect all of that information on the status of the roads? How could new technology help with that? Winter road maintenance, that's a very current topic right now. There are certain routes that the snowplows have to drive, and there's a certain amount of salt that the drivers put out there. What if we could give them the best possible information on the trajectory of the storm, the nature of the road conditions, and inform how much salt exactly or what type of mix needs to go on that part of the road that could save a lot of money. We looked at drones in public safety. We looked at sheriff's patrols, tracking of evidence in the court system. So you can say this was a wide range of use cases. We didn't have to say, oh, these new technologies only apply to one specific aspect of government. They applied almost universally. And all of that is captured in a very detailed report, and I'll show you the link in a moment. And so what exactly happened? I mentioned we had 3 events. We spent the morning having a keynote speaker really provide an education. What is artificial intelligence? How do we have to think about that? At the next event, what is the Internet of Things, and how can sensors inform what you're thinking about, and then blockchain? We spent an hour on problem definition in each use case. What is the exact problem we're trying to solve? And then 2 hours brainstorming on solutions. So again, there's a detailed report, and I thought I had a slide in here, but apparently not. Maybe it's coming later. There's a detailed report available on the WCA website. So if you go to the WCA website, the easiest is you go just to the search bar and you enter Digital County, and it'll bring up a couple of resources. There was a recent webinar that I had the opportunity to give that was recorded, so you can hear about it there. And there's a 200-page report. If you're curious about any of those use cases, if you're curious about the essence of those keynotes, you want to just catch up on some of that knowledge, it's all captured in that very detailed report. So now, we want to go forward. We want to develop a digital vision. And once again, Troy Streichenbach with Brown County is stepping up. So what is this idea of the digital vision of a county? It's not, what we don't want to do is create a utopia to say, well, by 2025 we'll have flying cars and all of that. That's not really sort of the heart of what we're trying to do. But what we're trying to do is to say, what are actually the different dimensions that county leadership has to think through in preparing for this digital future, right? And so at the very heart of it, county government is a central node. And each of the nodes that I'm about to open up here can be viewed through this digital perspective. So the first one that we have is serving your constituents. I provided a couple of use cases. Let's start on the top, digital interactions and self-service. There was a time where no county had a website because there wasn't such a thing as the web. Today, it would be unimaginable to you to not have a website, right? In fact, when the new research portal was introduced, somebody immediately said, I can't find it on the web, right? We've become used to finding information on the web. Well, there's an evolution to that because the way our websites are designed today, it's often like a store. You kind of have to find the aisle, go to the right shelf, and then pull up the right information. But you have to have a bit of an understanding of how the website is organized. If you think about how you use your smartphones to access information, you just say, hey Google or Alexa, find me this. Or you start to type a search term and Google somehow magically completes your search and like, oh, yeah, that's exactly what I was looking for, right? How do they do that? So there are new technologies that change the way in which people are looking for information and in which they expect to receive that information back. Having to go into an office to get a paper application, having to fill out that paper application and turn it back in, and then maybe have to come back because something was missing, that is all yesterday, right? So digitizing the interactions with your constituents is going to be a big part of it. And the question is, how far do you want to push that as a county? Do you want to experiment with that in one particular aspect to see how it works, see if your constituents actually really want that, if they respond to that? Or do you want to go all in? Do you want to digitize everything? Italy just announced they created a new government position, and the job of that new secretary in Italy is to digitize all interactions between the population and the federal government. They want to move everything into the digital space. The next one is collection and ownership of data. That was really a big pain point in some of the use cases that we discussed, where people said, we have information about the people who live in our county. Some of that information lives over here in this database. Some information lives over here, and we are not allowed to share it. Well, sometimes even if we're allowed to share it, we don't know. We can't connect that data exactly. I go back to the example of Google and Amazon and how they are collecting data about us. Well, what attitude do you want to take as government? In China, they have a surveillance program now where they have cameras in all public places, and they record what their citizens are doing. And if you are misbehaving and they recognize your face, it's like we get a ticket when we don't drive accurately. Their citizens are now getting penalties for bad behavior in public. That's an extreme example, right? Is that the society we want to live in, where we are under constant surveillance? On the flip side, if we don't know anything, if we don't collect any data, then we can't make predictions. We just heard some impressive examples how once you have the data, you can actually make predictions and you can draw value from that. So where do you want to play on that spectrum? Maybe the answer is not the same for every county. Maybe you're saying, you know what, I'm not going to figure this out as a county because the state has to tell us what the boundary is. And maybe the state is saying, well, we're not going to figure this out as a state because the federal government has to tell us where the boundary is. But what if the federal government doesn't do that? What if the state doesn't do that, right? Again, I come back to that, the roles of government, creating an environment that fosters adoption. We have to have this dialogue. There is no preset answer to that, but how could we create a position on that topic? Amplifying expertise. You have some employees who have 25 years of experience, and when they get a case for application for child support or application for economic support, they go through this very quickly. They know how to collect all the information and assess it. But then you have employees who may be 3 weeks on the job, 6 weeks on the job. They can't possibly have the same expertise. There's a lot of new technologies called expert systems. Not that they are intended to replace the human, but they are allowing the human to access a deeper expertise, and that expertise is often drawn out from those who really have the years of experience. There's also knowledge systems that are running in the background. We had one example from the 911 center, where when somebody calls into 911, that's a highly stressful situation already for the agent in many cases. There are technologies now that can listen in to words that are being said, breathing patterns, emotional patterns. They can recognize that and say, wow, this sounds like there's a heart attack situation or a stroke pattern that's going on, and it signals that to the agent so that the agents can ask a couple of additional questions. That is amplifying expertise. So you can do a better job in serving your constituents and meeting their changing expectations, because they're going to interact with these new technologies when they go shopping and when they have interactions with other organizations. At some point, they're going to come to expect the same level of digital experience from their government. On the flip side, balancing resources and demand. If there's a shortage of workers in Wisconsin, I'm sure you have a shortage of workers in county government as well. Everybody's going to be impacted by that. Nobody has enough resources to do all the work. So, what could we do about predicting demand? Are there technologies that could help us figure out how many people are likely going to apply for economic support in my county next year or next month? What are the trends? What are the early warning signs that could tell me that is likely going to go up or it's going to go down? What are other predictors? Building a database like what Mark and Dale are entertaining there, that's the starting point. And then applying very powerful predictive software to that could be the next step. Resource matching. Say you have a caseload in your Health and Human Services Department of how many cases per worker. How do we make sure that the type of case, the complexity of the case, the sensitivity of the case is best aligned with the expertise of the person that's handling it? And analyzing and optimizing performance. One of the treasures that you are sitting on is historical data, years and years of data. But you don't have the tools today to go back and say, let's analyze the 10,000 cases that we've dealt with over the last 20 years, to the extent that we have them digitized. When we offered this type of intervention, what was the result? When we offered this type of intervention, what was the result? That's what companies do in private business. They create these databases and they learn from it. And then they can create new rules and new guidelines for their staff on how to do that. You have the data, but you don't have the technology yet to extract that value from the data. Oops. Creating governance and rules. Now, as a county, you have some influence on creating local governance frameworks and rules. Much of that is going to be provided by federal law or by state law, but there are still some ordinances that you can create at the county level. The question is, which ones? Like, for example, rules about where drones can or cannot fly. Can you influence that at the county level? Or the creation of special zones for business. Where should and where do you want to play as counties in that governance space? And then efficient administration. There are technologies called robotic process automation. And that doesn't mean that an actual robot comes in and does the work, but these are processes that are being conducted over and over and over again, the same routine processes, maybe sometimes involving taking data that came in on a paper application and entering it into a system. And then it's getting processed, and maybe it has to be transferred into another application. There are many examples of that, and huge opportunities to further automate that, free up your people from that administrative work, and allow them to spend more time with their constituents. Infrastructure as an economic driver. One of the great disparities in the state is access to broadband, right? Some people have the benefit of fiber. There's a 1G park in Green Bay, and it's very attractive to businesses, to tech companies, and that kind of creates a buzz around, that's the place to be. Well, if you don't have fiber going through your county, what are the alternatives? There are some experiments now being conducted with using the white space in the TV band, and that could bring broadband to everyone. But again, what are the infrastructure requirements for your county? Have you thought through that? It's not just laying the fiber, but also anticipating if all of these technologies are going to be implemented, the amount of data that's going to be generated by all the households, by all the businesses, is going to explode, right? How much of a data infrastructure do we actually need? Many new technologies like autonomous vehicles, they require that the data gets analyzed very quickly. There is not even time to send it to the cloud to be analyzed and sent back to the vehicle. By the time it's back, you might have already run over someone, right? So there's a new concept called edge computing. That means the analytical capacity, the infrastructure has to be built on site. Where in your county are these opportunities? There's 5G wireless. All the telecom companies are salivating over creating this new telecom infrastructure because in 5G, they don't have a few big towers that relay the signals. They're going to need a lot of little towers in close proximity that they can relay all the signals. Well, counties have some nice infrastructure. You have lamp posts, you have some buildings, right? So how are you going to participate or cooperate with the telecom companies to bring that 5G infrastructure into your county? And finally, inspiring and igniting process in the community. This is not just about county government. This is about sending a signal to the community, declaring, kind of putting a stake and planting the flag on the moon, saying, we are a forward-looking county. Remember the quote, right? The best way to predict the future is to create the future. But if you don't take the time to think through these issues and to develop a perspective as county leaders, it's going to be hard for you to credibly plant that flag. And so Troy is taking the lead. We're going to go through this process with Brown County to try to develop answers to those questions. Now, this is a huge opportunity for engagement because so many people want to and need to learn about this. So we have increased preparedness for the county board and the county leadership team. There are many county board representatives who may be hearing for the very first time about artificial intelligence and those impacts. But it is an opportunity for them to hear it. It is an opportunity to think through these policy and infrastructure questions. The dialogue with county employees. I was talking to a leading company in the state, and they were not embracing these new technologies. And when they finally announced that they're going to look at this and move forward, they had a lot of their employees step forward and say, gosh, I'm so glad that we're finally doing this because I was about to leave. I was about to quit and go to a company that's looking at the future. I was scared that we would just be left behind. I think you have a little bit of risk within your employee base as well. And then you have maybe many employees who have, again, they don't know what to expect. They are maybe worried about their jobs. American Family Insurance is doing something very interesting. They are putting their employees through seminars about robotic process automation. The very thing that could kill some of the jobs, they're educating their employees on. And why are they doing that? Because they don't want people to feel like they are a victim of the technology. They want them to feel like there's an opportunity here. Yes, my current job is going to change. Some of the things I'm doing today are going to be done by machines. All right? I appreciate that you're telling me that, then I can get ready for that. But guess what? There's going to be new activities that nobody is doing yet today. Well, what do I have to do to qualify myself to do and perform these activities. That's creating a proactive posture among the employees so they embrace these new technologies as opposed to saying, whoa, the robots are coming for my job. Involving key community stakeholders. We cannot just do this in Brown County with Troy and the county board and the county leadership. There is the Green Bay Chamber, the Greater Green Bay Chamber. There are community organizations. There are large companies. So we want to find ways of engaging these community stakeholders in that dialogue. And ultimately, you have the relevance to the constituents. By doing that, you can demonstrate a positive mindset in your region towards mastering the challenges of tomorrow. And we're going to try to find out how can we create effective mechanisms of gathering feedback, of communicating this change out to the constituents. This journey and the outcomes will not be the same for every county. So even if we do this for Brown County, that doesn't mean, oh, here's now a playbook. Let me take that into my county and apply it in the same way. Because your starting point may be different, your philosophy may be different, right? The stakeholders may be different. If you're a county that's, that has a lot of large technology companies, just think about, how Foxconn is coming in and how they're coming in. We'll have to figure this out, right? But down in Racine County, it's going to be a very different dynamic than maybe in Door County, right? What drives your priorities of all the things I just mentioned? Which of them are most important to you? Is it becoming more efficient? Is it becoming, making your workforce more productive? Or maybe your priority is that service experience for your constituents. I don't know that every county will have the same exact answer to that. Do you have particular challenges and opportunities shaping your agenda in your county? Is there a passion maybe? Maybe you have somebody already in your IT department or on your staff who says, oh, I have a real passion for this and I want to try it and we've experimented with it already. Well, then maybe that could be a starting point. Do you have opportunities for collaboration with other counties? If every county has to go through this journey all by themselves, well, that could be, number one, more expensive, more time-consuming, right? So if some counties bond together and say, let's tackle this together, there might be an opportunity for that. And ultimately, something that we'll have to address, what is the role of the state related to this? How will the state get involved? The position that Troy and Mark are taking is, well, we're not going to wait for the state to figure this out. We're going to just go ahead. And then the state can react to the fact that we are moving forward, that we are creating the digital county. So if you're ready to learn more, here are the links. And it's a huge link. Again, the best way is go to the WCA website, enter Digital County into the search bar, and it'll bring up the webinar, and it'll bring up the 200-page report where you can see more. If you have specific questions for me, Oliver at mystrategysource.com, or if you have specific questions right now, you have the opportunity to ask me before you head out for lunch. Questions?
Thanks a lot. Really interesting. I feel like a lot of people just freeze up because of all this stuff. They don't really know. It's overwhelming and all that stuff. But I can't help. So I'm from the University of Wisconsin-Madison. I can't help but realize there are a lot of people on our campus who are thinking about these issues really deeply. Suman Banerjee, maybe you know about him and the Paradrop and the edge computing and 5G, all that stuff. I mean, that's like he's built a national reputation about that. There's an entire national network called Metro Labs who are thinking about smart cities and US Ignite and all this kind of stuff. And I'm just kind of wondering, how do we take advantage of that? Or how have you seen that localities have taken advantage of the expertise that's literally right within their reach? And where is the university system in all this? Also, private colleges and tech colleges, I think, are a big part of it as well, not just UW. So, yeah.
Yeah, so I'll step back from the digital county and I go to the level of advancing AI Wisconsin. When we started this effort, our mission was very modest. It was kind of like the Paul Revere analogy. We're going to ring the bell right through the state and say AI is coming, and everybody's going to wake up and organize the resistance. What we found was that, well, there wasn't somebody. You know, it wasn't the state, it wasn't the WEDC, there wasn't anybody to step up. So Advancing AI Wisconsin became sort of a collective of people who had a passion, who had the capability, or who had the interest in that. Kavinda Caldera from the e-business consortium, for example, we've connected with him. Now, not everyone in the state is willing to collaborate. You know, I've heard from some companies like, we're okay, we're doing this, we have resources to do this, and we don't want to share with our competitors. So what we said, we're building a coalition of the capable and the willing, right? And we may not have everybody in the state involved, but our door is open. We are totally inclusive. We want to connect with more and more people. I think we have connections now to 10 universities. I just spoke to 2 technical colleges in northern Wisconsin, where we're going to try to put together a seminar series, an educational series for business leaders in those regions. But if you have connections, if you have introductions to make, please. My email was on there. Give me your card. I'm hungry to connect more people into our effort. Yes, other questions?
I was just wondering, having worked with them over here, having worked with had some communications with the university system, do we have the support staff within the state of Wisconsin educated to be able to move this forward fast enough? I mean, just, you know, I understand the wave is coming, and we've had conversations, you and I, in regards to that. Do we have the support staff throughout the state of Wisconsin to see that take hold, or is our education system behind when it comes to that?
I don't want to give a universal response, but I'll give you a couple of examples. In the early days, we spoke to several colleges to say, where are you on this journey? What are you doing? And the response was, well, we are not yet hearing from our employer boards that they have a workforce need on that. So we're not yet moving, right? And so it was a chicken and egg problem, right? Because if the employers haven't figured this out yet, they're not going to articulate the demand to the colleges are not responding. There are some colleges who are in a very privileged position. MSOE got this huge grant from the NVIDIA manager, right? So now they can build an AI center with $30 million grants. UW-Milwaukee is building the Connected Systems Institute, right? Marquette has the blockchain lab, and I'm sure UW-Madison has multiple efforts on that. But when we looked across all the 74 colleges and universities in Wisconsin, at the end of 2017, 58 of them did not yet have a class in their syllabus on AI, Internet of Things, or blockchain. So the indicators are that while we have pockets of advancement, we are not in a position yet to move fast enough as a state. And that's going to be the big rallying cry for Advancing AI Wisconsin. I just wrote a new white paper, The Digital Transformation of Wisconsin, and I'm trying to get that out to as many people as possible at the state level so they can read it and say, just like, you know, if Troy didn't embrace this and said, we're going to move forward with a digital vision for Brown County, we need somebody at the state as well to embrace this and say, let's run with this.
Bill?
Good morning. Jason Haas, Milwaukee County Supervisor. Thank you for your presentation, sir. You said Brown County engaged in a regional approach, which I think might be a very viable course for a lot of our counties. I'm in Milwaukee, of course, where we have a lot of great resources you just named, but I'm thinking of our colleagues to the north and northwest, or the south and the southwest, that don't have quite what we got. So I would like to have you briefly touch on the regional approach up in Brown County and tell our colleagues I'm interested in looking at that as well. Thank you, sir.
So the first part was the integrated approach that Troy suggested was on part one, right? So we had to bring many counties together, because if we make this sort of a secret pilot in Brown County, then we'll be working on it for a year, then we'll be releasing it for another year, and by the time everybody else has access to it, that wave has already gone over us, right? So the Digital County series was open to all counties. As I said, 12 ultimately participated. A few have since come forward and said we'd like to get involved, but the invitation still stands. Now this vision development, we're going to focus that right now on Brown County because it's the first time we're doing that. We're going to probably learn a lot from it, but it is, kind of building a model, and we're going to be very transparent. Troy has agreed to full transparency, so whatever we're figuring out, whatever we're learning in Brown County is going to be shared and made available, probably again through the Wisconsin Counties Association, to everyone else, right? I would strongly encourage counties, especially those who are adjacent to each other, to maybe say, all right, we could have 7 county visions in the M7 region, or maybe we'll just develop a digital vision for the Milwaukee region, right? Would probably be just as feasible. I don't know the local politics, if that's actually going to happen or not, but I think that's an encouraging vision, right?
One more over here.
Larry Smith from Winnebago County. We have one of the biggest problems when counties try to work together is there's a lot of bureaucracy within the state that puts stumbling blocks that prevents us from working together. Now, we have a great opportunity this next couple of days to talk to some of our legislators and see if we could get them to get some of those stumbling blocks out of the way so we can get that inter-county cooperation.
Yes. Yeah, I met in December, I met the former CIO for the state who kind of runs all the systems for the state, and we had bumped into each other at a conference where he was talking about expanding broadband access in Wisconsin, and it was the first time he heard about the digital county, so he invited me to his office, and he said, I would support you, but my tenure expires on January 7th, so I'm now kind of trying to sort of reload and get back to those decision makers at the state level, because as we saw in many of the use cases, if the state controls the software that you're using at the county level, then you can't just plug in a new technology into that software. The state has to agree with that. And if the state does, then, well, the benefit becomes available to all counties at once. So there's huge leverage. But again, we're not sitting and waiting until the state moves. We're starting to move, and maybe we're going to pick some examples that don't rely on the state first.
A couple of items. If there are specific obstacles in the way of cooperation, please connect with Kyle Christensen. We have a very open legislature, very willing to try to help us remove those obstacles. And secondly, I'd encourage anybody in southeast Wisconsin to connect with Jason, either at lunch or this evening, to have a conversation about what might be. Ladies and gentlemen, let's thank Oliver.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
All right, a couple of quick items here. We're gonna break for lunch here momentarily, but a couple of items. Today's breakfast was brought to us by Alliant Energy, by PFM, by our good friends at Gregory and Appel Insurance and Boston Mutual. I think Dave, Paul, Leslie, are you here? Are you in the room? No? Okay, they're around, but you might want to check with them. A great product. Our lunch today is sponsored by Von Briesen and Roper. Andy Phillips, are you here in the room yet? Not yet? Okay. The PMA Financial Network and Wisconsin Investment Series Cooperative. Our friends Michelle Weiberg, Sarah Schnorr, Brian Hextall, John Huber. Anybody from PMA here? Yes, one. Okay, Brian, great. And then Forecast 5 Analytics, Jeff Carew. I saw him earlier. Jeff, are you here in the room? They're all out waiting at the door, waiting to greet you and say welcome for the lunch that they bought. Okay. Here's the lineup for this afternoon. We're going to reconvene back here at 12:45. We'll have a WCA staff legislative update. We will then go through a little prize distribution. Then we will have an Ask the Attorney event. Ask the Attorney, ask the staff anything on your mind. Then we're going to hear from Green Bay Packer Hall of Famer Mark Tauser, which I think that's going to be fascinating. And then following Mr. Tauser, we'll have former Governor Tommy Thompson and I will be having a little chat up here on the stage. And then at 5 o'clock, we're going to have just a tremendous reception. So we'll break right now for lunch and then reconvene in this room at 12:45. Thank you.